Yo, 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 what up? This is a video about multiplying and dividing integers. I am your epic host, Mr. Shirley, and yes, I would like you to take a few notes as you watch this video. But again, since this should be a review from last year, those notes can be pretty brief. Okay, so you can title this Multiplying and Dividing Integers, surprising as that might seem. Make sure you throw a date on there so you can keep it in order. And in this video, we'll just be considering some methods for multiplying and dividing integers. Okay, to start with, we have a pretty pink shade apparently. There are a few rules for multiplying integers as far as what your answer should end up as and the sign you should get from it. Okay, so feel free, you do need to record these, but feel free to use some, just the signs instead of actually writing everything down. So positive times a positive equals a positive, positive times a negative equals a negative, negative times a positive equals a negative, and negative times negative equals positive. Or another way to look at it is that if the signs are the same, you end up with a positive. If the signs are different, you end up with a negative. Okay, I'll leave it to you to decide which one of those ways of remembering works the best for you. Okay. Let me get my selecting tool back to get rid of the shade. I would like you to take just a moment and try out these examples, okay? Yes, I've put them in a certain line, so I'm very clearly suggesting to you what your answer should be in terms of positive and negative, okay? And you just do the multiplication using the numbers normally, multiplying normally, and then putting in the sign afterwards is the way I suggest. Okay, so take care of the multiplying first, then decide what sign it should be. Or actually, I guess you could do it in the opposite way. Figure out the sign first, and then multiply. Okay, but just remember that the actual sign doesn't affect really what the numerals would be. That's just based on what numbers you have in there. Okay, so positive 5 times positive 2 would equal positive 10. Okay, and what I was saying before was that if this happened to have been negative 5 times positive 2, you would still have a 10 there. It would just be a negative 10 in that case. Okay, but it doesn't change the fact that because it's a 5 and a 2 and you're multiplying them, you're going to get a 10. You just need to determine whether it's positive or negative in front. Okay, so with this one, we know positive times a negative equals a negative, so we have a negative sign, and then 3 times 3 equals 9. Okay, fairly straightforward. Again, this should be partly review, and the multiplying should not be difficult. Please make sure that you are, I recommend you try these without a calculator, at least at first. If you need to use it to check some of your multiplication, that's fine. But please make sure you're double checking what sign you should have in your answer, because you know these rules. I know you all do, and you can use those to check what you should get. All right, so negative times a positive means we end up with negative 14. Remember that if there's no sign in front of the number, it is assumed that it is positive. Okay, then last one, negative times a negative equals a positive. So we have a negative times a negative, so that equals a positive. I'll put it in there just because. And 5 times 3 is 15. Okay, fairly straightforward so far. Yes, Mr. Shirley. Okay, so on we go. The next slide, we're going to look at some division, and another pretty pink slide because why not? Okay, so the rules for dividing integers are exactly the same as the rules for multiplying integers. So feel free to reuse the note that you just made for the last slide and just make a note in there that used all the same rules apply for division. Okay, so positive divided by a positive equals a positive. Positive divided by negative equals negative. Negative divided by positive equals a negative as well. And negative divided by a negative will get your answer as positive. Once again, or the other way I explained it the last time is that if both your signs are the same, you end up with a positive answer. If your two signs are not the same, so you have a positive and a negative in whatever order, you end up with a negative answer. Okay, so whichever way works best for you to remember that is fine with me. Take a moment, please, pause the video and try these questions right here. And I will assume you all did that. Now, because again, I've got this laid out in a chart, it should be pretty easy to figure out what your sign should be on the answer. I'm helping you out while we practice a little bit. So we know that a positive divided by positive should be a positive. We'll put in our optional plus here, and then 8 divided by 4 gets you 2. Okay. Next, we know positive divided by negative should get a negative answer, and then 15 divided by 3 equals 5. Okay, so try and treat it, remember we're sort of treating it in two parts. One part is what sign it should have as far as the integer, so positive or negative, and one part is the division, which is the numerical part. Okay, so negative divided by positive means our answer is negative. 12 divided by 6 is 2. Negative divided by negative means our answer should be positive, and 30 divided by 10 is 3. Okay, on we go. I would like you to take a minute, pause the video yet again, and try out some of these questions here. One thing I will note, these are also done in such a way as to express a few different ways of showing multiplication and division. Okay, so when you have brackets side by side like this, it's assumed you're multiplying. If you have a dot, again, assuming you're multiplying. We'll use these lots in the algebra unit as well, where x makes an appearance lots of times in the question, and you don't want to confuse it with the multiplying sign. If you see what looks like a fraction, that's the same as 60 divided by -5. It's a division sign, basically. Okay, and then the standard division sign. So again, try these out, see what you get, and yeah, give it a try. So we'll take up a few of them. So -4 times +3, so negative times positive means our answer should be negative, and then 4 times 3 should be 12. Okay, negative times negative means our answer is positive, and 5 times 8 is 40. These should be getting faster and faster as you're going through. So if you think that, that's great, good job. 60 divided by -5, so it's positive divided by negative, which means your answer is a negative, and you end up with -12. Negative divided by a negative equals, should end up with a positive answer. Oh, and +6, and I just didn't write it there. Please do keep in mind that when you're writing something like a fraction that has a negative in it, make sure that you are only putting that negative sign on the top or the bottom, or making it clear that it's out in front. Okay, so just as an example, if we had, we'll say use 3 over 2 just as an example. Okay, so we could have -3 over 2. That would work out just fine. But you want to be careful to differentiate that between this. So -3 over -2. These two things are quite different. Okay, and if you were to divide them, you would get answers that would be opposites from each other, the opposite sign. Because in this question here, you are taking a negative divided by a negative. In this question here, you are taking a negative divided by a positive. So that's a different thing. So just make sure you're being careful and consistent with where you put the negatives for a fraction. Okay. On we go to our last slide, and this is also another way with the multiplication rules to consider adding and subtracting of fractions. Too much talking about fractions. Adding and subtracting of integers. Okay, so remember from before that when you had the signs together like this, now we're not really multiplying anything, but the same rule still applies as far as what your answer should be. Okay, so if you have a positive and a negative together, remember they're opposite signs, so that means you should end up with a negative. In this case here, you've got a negative and a negative, so normally when you do a negative and a negative multiplied or divided, you'd end up with a positive. Okay, and that's basically what would happen with the actual math, if you recall. So 5 plus -2 means you're starting at 5 and moving 2 in a negative direction, which is the same as 5 minus 2. Okay, notice that's exactly what we had for the sign, turning into 3. Okay, so when the signs are together like that, you can turn them into just that one sign, or that one operation of subtraction. Okay, same over here. If we're starting at 6 And normally when we were adding before, you would add the opposite, so do 6 plus positive 4, or you can just note that the two negatives together would get a positive and you'd end up with 6 plus 4 or 10. Okay, so this is another a tool you can use when adding and subtracting. If this makes sense to you, if you like using it this way, you are welcome to do that. There are many ways to think about operations with integers, so I encourage you to work on one of the ways that makes the most sense to you and stick with that one for working through all the problems. So please try out the worksheets that I gave you. Let me know if you have any issues or concerns, and we will talk during our meetings or by email. Thank you very much for watching. I have enjoyed having you listen to me. Bye-bye.